Okay, well, good afternoon again, everyone, or good morning, depending where you're calling in from today. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Workshop Wednesdays webinar series with the Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services, and we are very, very happy to have you today. Very excited for our topic today. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar, as you just heard, will be recorded. All of our webinars are posted to our YouTube channel, and my colleague Sean Forms, who is on the line right now, will be posting the link to our YouTube channel, which has all of our previously recorded webinars on there. And you can find this webinar at the beginning of next month. So each month we do 2 webinars, and then we post them at the beginning of the following month. So keep an eye out for that. In addition, I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who registered for this webinar today. We won't have any slides, so we're not going to be sending any slides, but we'll give you a reminder about that link and the link where you can register for additional webinars as well. And again, we will not be using the chat as with all of our Workshop Wednesday webinars, but you can ask all of your questions in the Q&A box, which you'll see at the bottom. We hope to leave some time at the end for our panelists to answer questions verbally, so make them good. But yeah, put any of your questions in the Q&A box and we will try to get to them. My colleague Sean Forbes will be managing the question and answers. He'll answer a lot of them by text, and so it'll be viewable by all participants. But those that might be better answered verbally or an asset to all participants, we might be able to ask at the end to our panelists. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. The particular topic we have today is behind the scenes with human resources. My name is Marla Lazarus. I have been a recruiter with CMS for over 20 years. So I love this topic because as a recruiter, we engage with the general public all the time about jobs, about applying to CMS, about applying to the federal government in general. And I feel like the human resources process, the application process, is such a mystery to most candidates. So that's why I love this topic, because it just kind of peels back those layers. We get to really go in depth about what happens behind the scenes that everybody might not know about. And I feel like when you are armed with that information, then you have a better understanding of the whole process. And it's less kind of like black hole-ish, what's happening to my application, and more, okay, this is what I know is going to happen. This is what I can expect in the process. So with that, for those that might not be familiar with CMS at all, the Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services, we are one federal agency under the Department of Health and Human Services, and we are responsible for the Medicare, Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, and the federal health insurance exchanges, those marketplaces that were created by the Affordable Care Act. So combined, our programs touch the lives of almost 150 million Americans, so we have a large reach. We are headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland, right outside of Baltimore City, actually in Woodlawn, Maryland. We have a small office in DC, a small office in Bethesda, Maryland, and then 10 regional offices around the country as well. Now, while we are a health policy focused organization, so that is definitely our bread and butter. We have a lot of health policy type of folks, health admin, public policy, public administration. We also hire kind of the gamut of a lot of fields out there, right? So we have a huge media and communications department. We hire public affairs specialists. We hire a lot of kind of business support, operational support type of functions. So we have financial management specialists, accountants, auditors, contract specialists, obviously human resources specialists, which we'll be talking a lot about today. And then we have a lot of STEM positions at our agency as well. So we hire a lot of IT specialists, economists, mathematicians, statisticians, actuaries. We hire data scientists at our organization. So again, health policy is what we do, but we have a lot of different positions that we hire for at CMS. So that's just a little bit about our agency if you're not at all familiar with CMS. But really what we want to talk about is the topic that we have today. So really what happens when you apply. So with us today, we have two very esteemed colleagues of mine in both Senior Human Resources Specialists. They both work in the division that I work for, which is the Division of Global Hiring and Outreach. And I'll just give them each a minute or two to kind of introduce themselves. So Heidi, I will start with you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Heidi Voss. I'm very happy to be here today. I started at CMS in 2014 in our division of staffing, and 2 years ago I moved over to the Division of Global Hiring and Outreach. And prior to that, I spent 13 years, maybe even more than that, off and on with the Army Corps of Engineers downtown in Baltimore.
Thank you. And Nicole?
All right. Hello, my name is Nicole Dean. And as Marla said, I'm a Senior HR Specialist here at CMS. I have been at CMS for, since 2015. And I've been an HR Specialist since 2016. Prior to that, I worked at the Agricultural Research Service for about 7 years in the capacity of HR Assistant. And I started my HR career in the payroll arena at one of the local colleges here in Baltimore.
So thank you. Thank you. So as you can hear, they're both very, very accomplished HR specialists. They know the process inside and out. I go to them with all of my HR questions. So myself and Sean, just to give you a little bit about our division, we work in the outreach side, and Nicole and Heidi are both more on the staffing side for any of our global kind of agency-wide announcements. So, so with that, I do have some questions that I'm going to pose to Heidi. So this is going to be more like a panel or interview process to kind of guide the conversation. But again, please feel free to ask any questions that you have in the Q&A box. We're not going to use the chat function, but if you use the Q&A box, we're going to try to save a couple of those questions for Heidi and Nicole at the end. So the first question is for Nicole. I will for Nicole. So in general, right? So you start the application process, you go on USA Jobs. I'm assuming most people on the line today have either submitted applications on USA Jobs, has been browsing USA Jobs, thinking about applying to federal government jobs. What happens after an application is submitted? What's that process like?
Okay, so after you submit your application in USA Jobs, as Marla says, it does not fall into a black hole. So we don't want you guys to worry about that. So basically what happens first is that the system will rate you based on your answers in your self-assessment, whether that be the questionnaire that we have, which you can preview in the job announcement, oftentimes, or whether it's another assessment through what we call USA Hire. So based on your responses, and if you respond positively, then you would move on to the next level. The system also automatically rates you depending on the type of announcement that you have applied to. Based on those parameters, then that's when we get to work. So first things first, on our side, we do some pre-work. We prep our spreadsheets that we have to report our qualifications analysis, as well as prep our applicant list that we work from. From that, we start with our priority candidates, such as veterans who have preference, because that's mandated by law. And again, that is depending on the type of announcement that we are working with and that you applied to. Once we send off our priority candidate list, if there are any eligible, then we could possibly go on to our non-preference eligibles. And we'll talk about that later with the difference between preference eligible list and non-preference eligible list and why that could factor in the timeline that you would see. From there, we would do first our eligibility analysis, because for every job announcement that you would apply to, it depends on the hiring path that we're looking for. So we would go and we would review based on your documents that you submit, your supporting documents, whether or not you are eligible to apply for that particular job announcement. Once we do that assessment, then we would go on further to review your qualifications to make sure that you have that specialized experience. From that, we would also respond to any announcement inquiries that you might have. Oftentimes you would see on the bottom of the job announcement, there's an email address. So that actually comes to a live person. It does not go to a robot. It does not go into the black hole. We are there to actually answer your questions. So that's something that we're also doing simultaneously. Once we complete our qualifications review, oftentimes it goes on to a quality review prior to issuing it to the selecting official and their team. Once that's done, and once we issue those lists of those who are minimally qualified, then the components, the hiring manager and their team, they independently review those applications and they reach out to candidates for interviews. So the HR office, HR specialists, we are not a part of that process, and we don't have any influence over who gets interviewed or not. Once the selection process is complete and they send selections into us, then we do a selection review. We're all about quality review here at CMS in the HR department. And once that selection is deemed good to go, then we go ahead and do the part that we love the most, and we go ahead and make the job offer. So that's basically what happens. In addition to that, we're also sending out notifications to applicants as well, just to keep them aware of what step we are in the process. And for those who might not have been chosen, they will eventually get a disposition letter saying that they were not selected for the position. And even prior to that, they also get a notification letting them know whether or not they were referred. And if they weren't, why?
Thank you, Nicole. I think that's kind of like the meat of today's webinar, but I think it's so important to just know the process, because a lot of times when folks don't know, it's just so unsure. So there's a lot of inquiries, but sometimes it's a lot of questions just in your head that, you know, maybe you don't make that inquiry to the HR specialist, but you just don't know what's going on. So that was very, very helpful. Thank you for that great explanation of kind of what happens after I press the submit button. And so Nicole touched on, Heidi, sometimes why things could take a little longer. So what type of factors could impact the length of time that the application process could take? Why sometimes does it take a little longer than other times? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, definitely. The first factor, especially for DGHO, is the number of applicants. We handle the Pathways program, so sometimes we get thousands of applicants specifically for the intern program, definitely hundreds of applicants for the recent grad program. Some of the other announcements might not get as many applicants, but then there's some other factors going in there, which is if there are different eligibilities that you've claimed, we have to verify each eligibility that you apply, that you select. We have to review your documents and make sure that you qualify for those eligibilities. Also, we may have, as Nicole mentioned, we may have qualified preference eligible, which is typically a veteran. So those veterans who are qualified have to get referred to the managers first before any non-veterans. So they have to either accept a job offer or withdraw from consideration before we can issue any non-veteran lists. Also, sometimes we're working on more than one vacancy at a time, which can impact how fast we get to the review. And then some other factors that could delay your start are getting your background check completed, and also official transcripts coming in, because some schools, for some unknown reason, don't send them electronically and they send them via regular mail. So that's been delaying things. And also, we do receive a lot of applicant inquiries once we send those notification letters. So we're definitely answering those as well.
Got it. Thanks, Heidi. I think that's also very helpful to know. I have run into a lot of candidates who feel like, I applied 2 months ago and I haven't heard yet, or I don't know if I'm going to be referred. And I think just knowing some of those factors that could lengthen the process, not necessarily hold it up, but just lengthen the process is going to be helpful to any candidate. So definitely appreciate that. So next, I'm going to go back to Nicole for this question. So a lot of times as candidates, we might be looking at applications and we just don't know, like, how do we know if we qualify either before we apply to a position or once we've applied to a position? So how do I know if I qualify?
That is an absolute fantastic question. So basically, how do you know that you qualify? First things first, you're going to want to review the job announcement. Just don't go off of the job title and look at the money and say, "Ooh, I want that," right? And just apply without reading. The first things first, even before you determine whether or not you qualify for a position, you want to go and look and see if you are eligible to apply for that position based on the hiring path that is advertised for that particular position. So the wonderful thing about USA Jobs is they make it really easy. They worked on numerous enhancements on a continuous basis to make things more user-friendly for the applicant. So basically, when you look at the job announcement, you're going to want to look in the upper right-hand corner of the job announcement. It has a little table and it tells you who that particular announcement is open to. Okay, so for instance, in DGHO, we oftentimes deal with recent graduates or interns. So it will say this job is open to recent graduates or interns, or it could be federal employees government-wide. There's also another piece that you might see sometimes where it's further explanation of who the job is open to. So definitely read that little key first. One of the great things as well is that USA Jobs, OPM, they've added little icons that correspond with those particular eligibilities. So you can click on the eligibility. If you're kind of not sure what that means, especially if you're brand new to applying to federal jobs, just click on it and it'll take you to another page that will explain what that eligibility is about. And it'll also give you kind of a preview of the documents that would be required in order to support you choosing that particular eligibility. In addition to that, within the announcement text, there's a link that goes to the what we call the CMS Required Documents. So that's something that you're always going to want to take a look at because it's CMS required, it is agency specific, and it will further explain a very thorough breakdown of the documents that you would need to submit in order to be deemed eligible for that eligibility, right? So let's say you've looked at that and you say, okay, I am eligible for this position. I'm good to go. What do you do next? You read the announcement in its entirety. That's something that any HR specialist will tell you. Like, you definitely read the announcement. You're probably going to need to read it actually more than once. So read the announcement in its entirety. You're going to have clues to show you whether or not you feel comfortable or confident in whether or not you're qualified for that position. You would see the summary about that position in the vacancy announcement. You would even see a blurb about the mission of that particular component that is hiring for that particular vacancy. When you look further, you have a section that goes over the different roles and responsibilities of that position. So if you're reading that and you're saying, yes, this gels with my work experience, then that's a really good indication that you're qualified. But that's not it. You're going to go down a little bit further in the job announcement in the qualification section, right? And you're going to look at the specialized experience that is listed for that particular vacancy announcement. Now, some people might think, they're thinking with their private industry hat. So we need to take that private industry hat off and put on your federal government hat. So it's really, really simple. Whatever the specialized experience states, that is what you need to have. So typically our specialized experience statements are typically 2 to 3 statements, sometimes 4. And one of the great things about CMS compared to other agencies is we actually number them for you. Why? Because we want to be user-friendly, right? So it's very clear, okay, this is specialized experience 1, 2, and 3. And so I need to have all of this. So if the specialized experience statement 1 says, okay, you need to have this, this, and this, then you need to have this, this, and this. And not only need to have it, but you also need to demonstrate it in your resume. And Heidi will further talk about that in a little bit. So you need to have all of the specialized experience, no cutting corners when it comes to that. In addition to that, another really great tool to use to kind of gauge whether or not you qualify for a position is to take a look at that occupational questionnaire. Now, based on this series that we are hiring for, some actually have the assessment questions listed within the occupational questionnaire. that you can preview prior to starting your application. So once you look at those questionnaire questions and you say, okay, this is something that I've done, this is something that I'm used to, this is something that my career has progressed, showing that I can do this, then that's a really good indication that you qualify. Let me see if there's any other tidbits. Another thing would be, depending on the grade of the job, certain grades have education substitution. So if you look at the job announcement and it says, okay, for this particular grade, let's say for instance, a grade 9, you either have the specialized experience or you can substitute education. If you have a master's degree, because it will tell you what type of education you need to be able to substitute. If you have that education, then you would then make sure you upload your transcript as well. And that's another way that you would know that you can easily qualify. And when I say qualify, we're always talking about minimally qualifying when it comes to specialized experience, as well as the education substitution.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. I think it's sometimes we feel a little remedial saying like obvious stuff, but I think it's so helpful to hear, like read the announcement. And then I love the fact that CMS numbers the specialized experience statements, because I think it's so helpful for an applicant to be able to see that 1, 2, 3. These are the things not only do I need to have done, but like you mentioned, need to have in my resume to be able to qualify. So
yes, and I actually have another tip that I forgot about, okay, that I would love to share. So basically what you can do is once you have your job announcement, there's an icon where you can press print. When you click print, print to PDF, and you can save the announcement as PDF. Back in the day, we used to print, right? But we want to save trees. So when you save that announcement as a PDF, you can go ahead and you can utilize the highlight function in Adobe and highlight those key sections, right? Because as you go in and you want to apply for the position, you want to make sure that you address those different key items throughout the announcement. You can also add little notes, like Post-it notes on the PDF as well. And that's just something that's a really great tip so that you make sure that you don't miss anything and make sure that you get qualified for that position.
Love that. Thank you. Thanks for that addition, Nicole. Now, Heidi, so now we've gone through the process. We know what it takes to be qualified, what happens after we're qualified. But can an applicant request to be reconsidered? Can they request a reconsideration for a position if they are found not qualified?
Yes, and I highly recommend that they do, because it does help explain the reason behind why you weren't referred. First thing you want to start with at the bottom of every announcement is the point of contact for that announcement. So it's either the HR specialist. For our pathways, we do have mailboxes, but they are monitored constantly. So you would just submit an email and say, hey, I got this notification letter. Could you please explain why I wasn't considered? I think I have the experience. So then I or another specialist will take a second look, because sometimes things do happen and you miss something, but they will explain, either you didn't meet the specialized experience or you didn't submit a required document, your transcript was cut off, or you didn't submit one, all a variety of things. Now, if you still don't agree and you're like, nope, I meet the specialized experience, I would like a reconsideration. So then you would write back to the specialist, say, please, I would like a reconsideration. So then another HR specialist reviews all your documents and your resume against the specialized experience. If they say, yep, you're right, you should have been on this list, you'll be added to that selection certificate, provided it's still open. If the second HR specialist says, nope, I'm still not seeing it, you still have one more opportunity to request another reconsideration. That is typically handled by the branch chief of whoever is the HR specialist handling that assignment. They have the final say. The other thing to remember is you can't submit additional information, any additional documentation. We have to base our review on what you submitted at the time of the application. So sometimes that factors in too.
Thank you, Heidi. And that really segue into our next question, because you cannot submit any additional documentation with a reconsideration request. So then our next question, Nicole, is what are those things that we have to have on our federal resume? Like, what are the must-haves?
Okay, so the easy, quick answer to that is everything that's requested in the job announcement. Again, read, highlight, do whatever you need to do to help yourself. So the job announcement gives you everything, a rundown of what you need to include in your resume. Now, you have the option on whether or not you want to utilize USA Jobs Resume Builder as opposed to your own resume that you draft. While you can choose either or, the thing is, when you go with the resume builder, you have a better chance that you will include all the important information that you need to include. So in the announcement, it goes through things such as, your dates of employment, whether it's full-time or part-time. That's very important because specialized experience states that you have to have 1 year of that particular specialized experience equivalent to the next lower grade. And speaking of grades, if you are a federal employee, you need to list your grade. Sometimes some do not. And depending on how your resume is formatted, or depending on the information that you choose to provide or not provide, it can cause you to be disqualified. So basically, you want to put everything on the resume that USA Jobs requests in the particular job announcement. The reason why the date is important, again, we have to assess that you've been doing that work for at least a year. So if you say, for instance, October 2020 to 2021, when in 2021, that could be January. And if it's in January, that's less than a year. So those are some of the things that you need to make sure that you have and that you follow directions, because this is really your introduction to trying to get a federal career. So you want to make sure that you follow instructions. And the better you follow instructions, the better or easier it is for us to be able to move along through qualifications. The easier it is for us to be able to keep our hair and instead of pulling it out, trying to decipher what is going on. Let's see. And another thing in your resume is that you want to have and show adequate work history. When you submit that resume, that is your proof that you are qualified for that particular position. It's not like private industry where it's a 1 or 2 pager. So you want to make sure that you really go in depth in quality information with regards to your work duties. The other thing that we want to see is that you actually break out your work experience. So if you've been at a particular job for a long time, but have held different roles, then we would want to see the dates that you've had those different roles as well. So the more thorough you are with your breakdown, the better, because trying to lump everything together or trying to take the easy way out, unfortunately, might cost you, depending on the route that you take. So those are the things that we definitely want to see. If you worked also on projects and they're highly technical, then please explain, because you're writing your resume for the HR specialist as well as the hiring manager. So you basically have to, yes, do all of the bells and whistles, but also break it down for us, because we want to be able to qualify you if you are qualified, right? So all of those things you just need to keep in mind when you are writing your resume. And as well, the other tip would be each job, you need to revise your resume. And that's why I noted before with the announcement, PDF it, highlight it. And as you make your notes, then you are revising your resume each time.
That's great. That's great information, Nicole. And I'll just piggyback. Just one thing that I always tell candidates is that HR specialists are not able to make assumptions, right? So anything to Nicole's point, anything that you want to relay, you need to spell it out. So they aren't able, not that they can't, but they are not able to make assumptions about things that functions that you might have performed based on a position title, right? If you want to get credit for those functions, they need to be spelled out in your resume. So Heidi, based on your multiple decades of experience HR. Nicole kind of went into some of the must-haves, what you definitely have to have on your resume. Can you talk about things that candidates maybe should avoid putting on their federal resume?
Yes, I could talk about this all day, but I just have a semi-short list. First, definitely don't put your picture on your resume. I know some websites might say that's the thing to do, but we can't accept that. I would say, unless you're just starting out, it probably should be more than 2 pages. Somewhere along the line, they said resumes should all be 2 pages, and that's not necessarily so for the federal government. I typically see 4 to 6 is the average. Obviously, if you have the experience, you don't have to make stuff up. Not enough information listed for employment entry. So like Nicole said, you want to definitely put at least the month and year if you don't know the exact date. You want to put if you're part-time or full-time and the number of hours and any contact info if it's applicable. The month and year and the part-time, full-time helps us determine if you meet that 1 year of eligibility. Also, as she said, don't group, if you're a current federal employee and you've been in a career ladder position, you don't want to group all the grades together. You don't want to say I was a GS7 to a GS12, because obviously your duties changed over time, because I had that. And so I just have it broken out. And some of them you might just copy and paste because you were doing the same duties, and then just add on the new ones. So just make sure that's very clear. For pathways students applying, you want to definitely put your graduation date or your anticipated graduation date. That helps us determine your eligibility as well. This is a personal pet peeve, huge paragraphs of text. I saw resume ones, I swear it was 3 pages for one job and it was all 1 paragraph. So I like bullets, not everyone does, but small paragraphs or bullets is good. It helps break it up. You don't have to put every job you've ever had. I had a resume that went back to 1968. That was a little much for me. I've also had like 100-page resumes. Surprisingly, not the one that went back to 1968. You also do not want to copy and paste the specialized experience from the announcement into your resume. Now, I have a caveat to that. I don't mind if you do that, but then explain underneath like how your experience met that specialized experience. I've seen people copy and paste it with a different font, so I can really tell that you copy and pasted it. I always recommend you tailor the resume for each job you're applying to. Most of the ones at CMS are slightly different. So I always say, read the specialized, read the occupational questionnaire. It might trigger something that you've done before and just don't have in your resume. So I always edit mine for each announcement. And finally, my tip is have someone else read your resume before you submit it, just to make sure you don't have any typos or glaring errors in that. And another one, if you PDF it and upload it, make sure it reads correctly. Sometimes stuff gets cut off and then we can't tell what's going on. And that's it for now.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. And yeah, I'll piggyback. I didn't even think about that PDF thing, but yeah, anytime we do a lot of kind of outreach information sessions, and we sometimes use slide decks. We are not today, but anytime I PDF a slide deck, all the formatting looks weird in the PDF. So it's a great point when you're PDFing your resume. Just make sure everything looks the same. So that's really important. So thank you for all of those. I'll go back to Heidi for this one because we do get this question relatively often from candidates. Is, they see the range on the vacancy announcements of the salary, right? So it's always like a lower number to a higher number. What does that mean? Does CMS negotiate salaries? Is that a thing that the government does? So turn it over to you.
Yes. So the salary range you'll see on the announcement ranges for every grade is a grade, and then there's 10 steps for each grade. So you're seeing the step 1 through the step 10. So if you see an announcement for a GS7 and GS9, it's going to be the step 1 for the GS7 through the step 10 of the GS9, just to show you the big range. So you can request higher salary. It's called a salary above the minimum. There's 2 circumstances. 1, your very first appointment to the government, and 2, reappointment after a break in service of 90 days. So if you're a current federal employee, that doesn't really apply. You would use the current pay setting rules for promotions or just reassignments, stuff like that. So it's for superior qualifications, not just because you currently make more money than what the initial job offer is. And it's up to the component that wants to hire you if they want to pursue the salary above the minimum. So we typically ask for either a competing job offer or your last 2 pay stubs. That lets us determine if you're even eligible for that. And then we'll reach back out to the component and say, this person requested a CM. Do you think you'd like to pursue that? Because that does have to go up the management chain to get approved. And many of our positions are career ladder. So even if you're starting at the step 1, the next year you'd go up another grade and then another grade and then another grade sometimes. So that's, you kind of have some built-in salary progression.
I think that's really advantageous for folks to know that it's possible. It's not something that happens commonly. It's not for every position, certainly. And those 2 things that you mentioned kind of go hand in hand, right? So the one threshold is the superior qualifications. So it's not just for anybody. You have to show that you've had superior qualifications in relation to the job you're applying to. And then second, that you have this salary either that you've been making or, like you said, a competing job offer, kind of the second tier of the threshold.
Oh, I did forget, for interns, it's always the step 1.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm sure we have some students on the line. I know we have kind of the gamut on the line today. So we have this webinar is obviously open to the general public. So I'm sure we have everybody from students to experienced professionals. So yes, good point. So kind of going back to some of the, a little bit of how we started, right? So like what happens after the application, I submit an application, Nicole, you did a great job of kind of going through that process. But kind of piggybacking off that, I think it's helpful for candidates to know in any generalized setting, like what are some of the things that HR specialists do in a day that candidates might not know about, and why, it's not just when a position closes, an HR specialist is fully focused on that one job. So what are some other things you do in a day?
Okay, so yes. So one of the things for people to know, and we did touch on that before, is that most of us are working multiple vacancies at one time, and we're working them in different stages. So we can actually have some certain announcements where we're working on qualifications for more than one announcement while we're starting a strategic consultation with the hiring manager and the HR liaisons for another announcement. And then another one, we could be working on the job analysis that we use to make those questionnaire questions that you see in the assessment. So we're constantly working on a moving schedule and kind of balancing multiple recruitment efforts at one time. Something else that we are doing, as we said before, is that we actually answer applicant inquiries that come in. So with that, sometimes some jobs are more popular than others. We can spend a good deal of our day just answering those questions. Sometimes it's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes it's just a simple answer and a thank you. So depending, that could take a lot of our time as well. Some of the other things we do is that we work on special projects for the agency. Because we're always focused on continuous improvement. So that's where the special projects come in. We do webinars like this one, and there are also times that we assist in job fairs as well. The other thing that we do that people might not realize is that we do actually have training. In addition to on-the-job training, we also have formal training through the graduate school, which is the premier training school and institute for federal jobs. So we actually do have to take classes like qualifications analysis, job analysis, as well as pay setting and other things like that. So sometimes, depending on where we are in our career, we can be gone for a day, 2 days, 3, and sometimes a week. The longest I've been gone was for 2 weeks for classification training. So that's some of the things that we do as well. Heidi, are there any that you can come up with as well?
Yes, so we definitely review official personnel folders to see if there's any missing information. I've had to track down contacting OP, the Office of Personnel Management and other agencies trying to get missing documents to make sure the record is complete. I've adjusted service computation dates. I've, like Nicole said, special projects like job fairs, webinars, doing lots of corrections sometimes based off those reviews of OPFs, official personnel folders. Just answering day-to-day questions from our colleagues as well. Oh, and processing actions all the time.
That's great, ladies. Thank you both so much for that. I think that's definitely a great insight into kind of what happens day to day. And so our last question before we get to some of these questions, I've peeked at the Q&A box and there are some fantastic questions in there. So I definitely want to get to a few of those. But Heidi, if you could start, I know there's a lot of myths out there. Like, what are some of the top federal HR myths that candidates should be aware that are not necessarily true?
First one is that resumes are reviewed by a robot. I can guarantee you at CMS they are not, because I read a lot of them, and so does Nicole, and so does a lot of our colleagues. So that's definitely a myth. The 2-page myth, I think that's a myth. I would say 4 to 6 if you have the experience for that. That you need a cover letter, not necessarily. Some managers like a cover letter, some don't. I just look at them to make sure it's actually a cover letter and not something else, because the only documents that go to our managers are a cover letter and the resume. Oh, the other one, you will never hear back about your application. It might take a little while to hear back about your application, but you will get a notice of referral and results, and also a disposition letter about the final disposition of the announcement. And the big one is HR doesn't care. That's definitely not true. I mean, we want to get as many people onto the referral list as possible. So I always say, help me help you. So read the announcements, can't stress that enough. Read, submit all the required documents, make sure your resume is easy to follow and very clear. Nicole, did I miss anything?
No, I think you pretty much got it all. The only other thing to add, just thought about it, is that we're just here twiddling our thumbs. So hopefully we've answered that and dispelled that myth. There's a lot of things that we do day to day that are going on. And also something that I didn't mention before is, depending on the job announcement, if it's, for instance, government wide, there are a lot of eligibilities that are available for people to select. And so some of the trends that we're seeing is that some people might select every single eligibility, even though they are not eligible for that eligibility, right? So all of that takes time. We have to go and look through all of your documents. If somebody decides to, they want to upload 15 different documents, we have to look at every single one. So that's just something as well that adds to our day. So we're not just, sitting, whether we were back in the office, at the office, just sitting and twiddling our thumbs or twiddling our thumbs at home. We are quite busy, especially at CMS, supporting such a great agency that's very busy. And as Heidi says, we really do care. A lot of us, we just have a passion for helping people. We are servants. And, we are also, the other important thing to mention is that we are not, at CMS, we're not generalists, HR generalists. So we don't think, we don't do that, dark side of HR that some people, don't like. So we love giving the job offers. We love helping people. So that's what we're really all about. And that's why we're very eager to do something like this so we can give you some insight. There was another webinar just like this, I believe earlier this year. We love to help. We love to give tips. We're really, really grateful for an opportunity like this, just to try to give, that insight and just crack the code.
I love that. Thank you both so much for kind of putting some of those myths out. So I really want to get to some of the questions here. We have some fantastic questions, like I said, from the audience. I'm actually going to take the first one real quick, and then the rest I'm going to throw over to you guys. So the first question that came in that we're going to just answer verbally, it refers to the recent graduate announcements in particular. So I know we have a lot of recent graduates on the line today. And for the eligibility for that, it does not require any experience. So some folks coming out of school may only have had one internship. and don't have a lot to put on their resume. So the question is, are there any qualifications that we should focus on or skills that we should focus on if we don't have a lot of experience to put on our resume? So that's a great question. What I would say from the managers that we interact with from the Global Hiring and Outreach Division is a couple things, right? So you never want to discount your educational experience as valid experience, right? So if you, in part of your college career, have been a part of work groups or teams or organizations, and you've held leadership positions and those type of things, make sure to include that in your resume, again, because the qualifications or the eligibility for recent graduate is just that you've had to have graduated within the previous 2 years. There's no real specialized experience needed for that position intentionally. And so for that reason, you want to make sure you list everything you can to make yourself stand out to a hiring manager. So I can say with pretty good confidence that a lot of our managers, not 100%, but a lot of our managers are looking for people with good writing skills and people with good analytical skills, right? So those two types of skills you should definitely focus on. Again, whether it's volunteer experience that you've had, internship experience, or your college career, try to focus on those skills. So hopefully that helped. So I'm going to put that out of the way and kind of get to some other questions here. So this one has to do with referrals. So I will see how this works and kind of toss it up, whichever one of you want to take this one. So the question is, what are the reasons for an eligible candidate to not be referred to the hiring manager? For instance, an applicant that is deemed tentatively eligible for the series and grade based on their self-rating and the qualifications. So.
Okay, I can answer that, but just quickly, just to piggyback on the last question, I just wanted to add something very important. Because the recent graduate positions in particular, they do actually have specialized experience, although all you need is the education and to meet that 2-year window, or for the upcoming semester to be a graduate. But where the specialized experience does come into play is if, let's say, you have a bachelor's degree, but let's say your work history could potentially qualify you for a higher grade. So that's where the specialized experience does come into play for the recent graduates, right?
Thank you for that clarification.
So, no problem. So when it comes to this question regarding the referral, so you have your letter, and your letter says that you are tentatively eligible, but you have not been referred to the selecting official. So when looking at that letter, and that's also very important to read in its entirety as well, if you scroll down a little bit more in that letter, then there will be a paragraph that kind of explains in what situations that might happen, right? So it could happen because, for instance, it could be that there were preference eligibles, a veterans list that was issued. And as Heidi mentioned earlier, until those qualified veterans, either accept the job, or they might decide, you know what, this is no longer for me. Once that list is exhausted, then it would open up the non-veteran list. So that could be one of the reasons why you would see a scenario like that one. Additionally, if you have a question regarding that, if you feel as though the notification letter is not sufficient as far as, kind of explaining what happened, then you can always send an email to us and we would be happy to further explain.
Great, great points, Nicole. Thank you for that. So kind of piggybacking on what Nicole just mentioned, so she kind of touched on a little part of this answer to this question. But the question was, what is the typical time frame after submitting an application to be referred or not referred to hiring managers, specifically for recent graduates? And so you touched on that veterans preference piece, but Heidi or Nicole, if you want to kind of elaborate a little more as it relates to recent graduate positions.
I can take this one because I just did one. The last week I issued a management and program analyst veteran list. It was 3 days after the announcement closed, I believe, maybe 2 days, I'm not sure. So that I was able to get done pretty quickly. And now I'm waiting for managers to either select the veterans or have the veterans say, I'm not really interested in that job anymore. I got another job or whatever. In the meantime, I am rating the non-veterans. I'm kind of guessing that eventually the veterans on the GS9 list are going to be selected. So I'm proactively rating the GS9 list so we can issue that as soon as possible once the GS9 list, non-vet list opens up. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific timeline because it really just, I hate to say it depends, but it depends because of just the number of applicants. And like we have 3 locations for that one. And I only have 1 veteran who's on all 3 locations for the GS9. That's how I can kind of guess that at least one of these other locations is going to open up. Hopefully it will be soon, but the lists are good for 240 days. So it could be a month from now that you get contacted about.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful for candidates to know that even if they aren't referred immediately, that a couple months down the line, it could still happen, especially as it relates to the recent graduate positions, because a lot of times we are hiring multiple folks for that program off of one announcement. So thank you for that, Heidi. Mm-hmm. This question came in, Nicole, if you want to take this, or Heidi, either one. Also referring to the recent graduate positions and specifically the USA Hire assessment. And the question was, do positions require a minimum passing score for that assessment? And is there a way that candidates can check their score?
Some series do have a minimum score. It would say it in the announcement. I don't believe we share the score.
Right, and USA Hire is still kind of relatively new, and I know I have not applied for a job anytime recently where I've gone through the process and I can kind of see how it goes. But as far as I know, you don't get a score. So for USA Hire, I'm not as knowledgeable about that, but we do know, Heidi, what are the particulars regarding USA Hire, where if you've taken an assessment within the past, is it the past year?
Yeah, so there's different assessments for different grades. But if you took one, say the assessment was for reading, that score you got will still be good for a year. So if you apply for another job that has that same assessment for reading, you wouldn't have to take that section again. That score stays on your in your file for a year, and it counts that way.
That's helpful to know. And for folks who may be a little confused, so it was mentioned before, but just to reiterate, some of our positions, or I might even say the majority of our positions, are posted with an occupational questionnaire. That is the assessment. So it's a multiple choice assessment questionnaire that you can preview ahead of time before you submit your application. Some of our announcements, I'll say, go through a separate assessment through what's called USA Hire. And it is a more in-depth and much more detailed assessment that you have to take and will result in a score as well.
I think it's more situational questions. I haven't taken one either, so I don't know 100%.
That's helpful.
Yes, and we don't see the questions ourselves as HR specialists.
Yeah, it's from the Office of Personnel Management.
Okay, so hopefully that's helpful to those who may not be familiar with USA Hire or that type of assessment as of yet. You may see them in positions you're applying to in the future. So the next question is, just check time. Okay, we've got a few more minutes left. So the next question is, again, a question about referrals and kind of follow-ups. So if a candidate has been deemed eligible but not referred, when they're reaching out to the HR specialists to get more information, are HR specialists able to provide specifics such as what was the qualifying score for the position and how I as an applicant did score?
Unmute. That is a very good question. I have not had anyone ask that in particular. But anytime we get a question that comes in that we might not be sure about, we do go to our leadership and we ask if that is something that is okay. At the moment, I don't know if that's something that we are able to share, but I know there are times when there might be a minimum score depending on the announcement that you are applying to. And we can share whether or not you met that threshold or not. And that would be dependent on your answers to the occupational questionnaire in the job announcement.
Thank you for that. So the next question is kind of logistical, but I think is definitely helpful for those on the line. So when submitting required documents such as a DD-214 that have personal information, should the candidates be blacking out or leaving blank their SSN and their date of birth, or black out those parts?
They don't have to, but it's perfectly fine if they do, just as long as we can read their name and we can see their disposition of service and that they were honorably or general discharge. And for other documents, I've seen people block out the first part of their social or part of their birthday. As long as I can, we might have to get a better copy later, but I understand for application purposes, that will be fine.
Thank you, ladies. And just a point to note, as far as submitting documents in general, is to make sure that they are legible, right? So I know a lot of times photocopying and scanning, it ruins the quality. Yes. But just make sure when you do scan something in that it is a legible document. Okay, so we are, oh, look at Sean getting through these questions. Okay. So the last question that I see here has kind of been touched on. Why does it take so long sometimes for an update to be provided after a candidate has been referred to a hiring manager? So can we talk about that specific scenario? I know we talked about the length of time, but so after a candidate might be referred, what are some reasons it could take a while for anybody to hear back whether they've gotten the position or not?
Well, the manager could go on vacation right after they get the list. So I think it just depends on the manager. Some managers move forward very quickly, some delay. Nicole, do you have any other?
Yes, and that has happened before on that side of the house. And hopefully we did explain on our side of the house why things could take so long. As far as once someone has applied to a position, we're just working on multiple things. It just depends on the workload. It depends sometimes on how technical the position is. It might require just a lot more attention to detail. And it largely depends on the quality of applications that we receive. Whether things are easy to read, whether there are a lot of people who apply who don't qualify. That unfortunately does take time from us going through a lot of applications where there could be 10 or 20 in a row where people applied and don't meet the minimum qualifications.
And so, looks like Sean just answered the next question I was going to throw out. Thank you, Sean, for getting to these questions. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one. There was a question that came in about whether there were any preferences. Do folks get military preference if you are in JR, TC, or ROTC? And I'm pretty confident that answer is no. There's very specific requirements of being active duty military service members to get veterans preference.
Yeah, that would be in the required documents. If you look at the links in our announcements, it'll spell out the military service that would give you some preference there.
Well, ladies, we have gone through all of our questions. We have gotten it through. So before we disconnect here, I do want to launch a quick poll. We really appreciate your feedback. We always strive to make these webinars more valuable to candidates. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this quick, just 5-question poll. If you could respond to that, that would be so helpful. And with that, I just want to thank you both for your time. Thank you so much. I saw a lot of just comments come in thanking us for this information, that the information was very helpful. So we appreciate that immediate feedback, but definitely appreciate both of your expertise and kind of sharing of yourselves and what you do and the kind of pulling back the curtain on this whole process. So I think it was definitely helpful for everyone. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and hope you got a lot out of this session today. The questions were fantastic. So thank you for your participation with that. Just a reminder, anybody that pre-registered for this will get a follow-up email. It will have the link to our YouTube channel to find this recording next month, as well as the link to register for any of our future webinars. So we do hold these webinars every first and third Wednesday of the month. Different topics. Some of them are going to be kind of federal government-wide topics. Some are specific to CMS. So we look forward to seeing you on more of our webinars. We are going through the first Wednesday in December this year. So our next webinar is going to be a federal hiring overview webinar, and it is going to be a condensed version of 4 topics. So these are 4 topics that we do separate dedicated webinars for, but we wanted to condense it all into an hour for you guys. So it's going to cover a quick overview of CMS, federal resume writing, USA Jobs applications, and a quick overview of our Pathways program. So feel free to register for that. That is going to be on October 20th. So we look forward to seeing you guys on future webinars. Again, I appreciate your participation today and really want to thank our panelists, Nicole and Heidi, for your expertise and sharing of yourselves today. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.